Hello, and welcome back to the Point and Laugh podcast with your hosts,
Skyler
and Kaylynne.
So today I get to cosplay being a history teacher, which is something I thought I was going to be in high school. And although this might seem like just another episode where Skyler dumps random info on you for an hour, hopefully that is not what this is. Like, okay, yes, this is another one of my random niche interests, but I think this particular topic is not only relatable to women today and has been relatable to women since the dawn of time, but yet another fun reminder that men have sucked in the exact same way throughout all of history all the time. So, quick question before we dive on in. So what's the worst way you've ever been dumped?
I've never been dumped.
That's fine.
Next.
That's fine.
However, no, I did have a little, I was talking to someone when I was in high school, and I got ghosted by him, not once, but twice.
How?
Well, so he ghosted me once, and then a few months went by, and then he reached back out, and then because I was 16 and a boy had never shown interest in me before, I was like, okay, it's fine. I'll
Sometimes boys just do that.
Yeah, it's fine. And then we talked again for 3 more months, and then he ghosted me again, and then the next week had a girlfriend. Which he was very much talking to this, which isn't illegal,
It's morally illegal.
Yeah,
Me
that's
when I
fine.
get you.
But it did make me question many things. That's probably my worst man experience. But yeah, I have been the one to initiate breakups historically.
Is there ever a breakup that you've done where you're like, oh damn, that one was kind of rat behavior, I probably should have gone about that a different way? Or have you been healthy the whole time? And you always went about breakups in a very nice way.
Well, I don't know if I should expose this. My first boyfriend, which I don't even know if he would say that he was my boyfriend.
Oh, no.
That was the issue. That was the whole fucking issue. Was cheating on me. And I found out because it was New Year's Eve. Then New Year's Day. It was after New Year's had started, it was past midnight. And we're in his basement watching, I don't know, something on the TV. And I look over and he's on his phone, and I see him. I look over because I see him take a screenshot. So there's the big flash of white.
Smart.
And I'm like, what is happening? And I look over, and it's a scandalous photo of another girl on Snapchat. And I'm literally
hey.
I didn't even say anything. I got my stuff and I got up. And just silently, and he was like, whoa, where are you doing? And they're like, what are you doing? What's happening? And I was like, oh, do you think I'm stupid? I was like, do you think I'm dumb? I just saw that. What? And then he was like, oh, yeah. And then just kind of he was like, sorry. And then I left and drove home. And then woke my parents up because I was sobbing in the next room. And my dad came up. Literally in his underwear because he was sleeping in his underwear, and he half asleep, and he's like, can you shut up? That's not what he said. That's not what he said. But he's like, Kaylynne, what is happening? Shush. And I was like, we broke up. And so yeah, that was probably, but again,
valid.
I won, so it's fine.
Well, so much of history for me, why I love history, is just me going to every historical figure and being like, damn, they just like me for real. You'd be surprised how much humans have stayed the same and will stay the same. And just the things that we go through recycle over and over in the big, giant, universal bucket of shame. Mm-hmm. So today, we're talking the 6 wives of Henry VIII, the baby. Why? You might be asking, why? Skyler, why? Why would you do this? Why would you put us through this? Why would you put Kaylynne through this? Because King Henry VIII of England and his infamous 6 wives is a speed run on the worst ways that women have been used and abused by men, all in order. And while I'll admit that the circumstances are unusual, they are still, this is court behavior, and they're kings, and it's court behavior. They're kings and queens dealing with land and treaties and whatnot, so their circumstances are obviously not going to be relatable. Oh my gosh, me when I have to order a crunch wrap on accident, it's just me doing a fucking treaty between me and a foreign nation. Not the same. But the reasonings and the reputations of why people do what they do and the situations that they find themselves in are often evergreen. So let's fucking go. For your help in this, because I know when I get a lot of information, I tend to go blue screen. there's a visual aid. So this is a book called The Six Wives of Henry VIII by Alison Weir. And I'm going to point to the pictures of all of these girls just so you have like a picture in your head.
Okay.
So that way, because 3 of them are named Catherine. It's going to be so... They're all incestuous, Kaylynne. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. So I'm going to point to all of them when they're talking. That way you have like an image of your head. So these are the girls.
Perfect. Wow. He is...
Ugly?
Yep.
Correct.
Yes. That's exactly what I was
I want you to remember his ugliness as we go through because his audacity for having looked like this.
It is the ugliest men who have the most audacity.
All right, let's fucking go. So in common parlance, the wives of Henry VIII were the 6 queens consort of King Henry VIII of England between 1509 and his death in 1547. So the purpose of this episode, I'm going to go through these queens, these girly pops, and by the end of it, I want you to pick your favorite. Like, which one speaks to you more, girl to girl, queen to queen? Did you open that?
Yeah. I was trying to do it away from the mic so it wouldn't be loud, but there we go, little drink.
It's okay, because it's a San Pellegrino. It's worth it. You can interrupt
my little
with
San Pellegrino. I'm gonna try and do it every single time.
And through repetition, one day you will.
And one day I will win. It's blood orange. Continue. That's my drink call for the day.
Blood orange. It's fucking red. All right, so we're going to start off with Catherine of Aragon. That's her.
Okay.
She kind of looks like me. I'm not going to unpack that. And throughout all of this, I'm sure I'm going to call her Aragorn at one point on accident. It's Aragon, not Aragorn. Aragorn is the Lord of the Rings character. I'm very smart and very wise and will not get those two things confused. So, Henry's first marriage to Catherine of Aragon lasted exactly 20 or nearly 24 years, while the following 5 wives lasted less than 10 years combined. So she was the OG, the original, that bitch.
Damn.
So Henry took the throne in 1509. 6 weeks later, he married Catherine, the widow of his eldest brother, Arthur. Okay, so she was only married to Arthur for like 5 months, so it's still weird, but it's not as weird as it potentially could have been. But just know that going into it, that's going to be a crucial piece of information going forward, is that technically she's a widow of his brother. But
okay.
5 months, not even a year as far as like royalty time, so in usual king fashion, Henry was dead set determined to sire a son to guarantee that line of succession would be secured. Play the Succession theme song. Unfortunately, Catherine would suffer multiple stillbirths or other children that did not survive infancy, except for one, a girl, Mary. Fun fact, this Mary ended up being the famous Bloody Mary, but that's like not important to this conversation right now. I just thought that was kind of like a cool fun fact.
That is a cool fun fact. Thank you.
To quote Tudor historian Tracy Borman, Henry viewed Catherine as a model wife in every respect, bar one, her failure to give him a son. This will be a reoccurring theme in this episode. This like immense pressure to provide, to perform something entirely out of your control. In this case, practically a miracle. Like giving birth and not dying was already impressive for the time. Having it, 1, be a boy, and 2, survive was asking nearly the impossible. Mm-hmm. So, unsatisfied with only having a dirty, filthy, nasty daughter, Henry had affairs with several mistresses throughout this whole marriage, including with Mary Boleyn, the daughter of an English ambassador to France, and later, Henry turned his attention to her even younger sister, Anne Boleyn, right there, appointing her as lady-in-waiting to Catherine. So prep yourself. This is where shit is about to get real. The power players are set. We're about to fuck shit up. Catherine, even though she gave it her best efforts, was now in her mid-40s and officially could not conceive anymore. In everyone's eyes, she had failed. And now Henry was full-blown panicking. Because he found Anne Boleyn attractive, and had he met Anne earlier, he might have just, like, forced her to bed like all of his other mistresses. But now the circumstances were different. Anne was young, hot, and fertile, but if she ended up giving birth to a son, he would be illegitimate, and Henry needed that son to be legitimate. And this is important. Anne actually refused to become Henry's mistress. She was like, okay, where's my ring?
Yeah. She was like standards king.
There's actually some debate on Anne's motivations here. Some claim that this was like a calculated move, that she was like, oh, I would. Henry, I totally would. What?
Sorry. Oh my God. This is so random.
What? No, please tell me.
Did you ever watch Ugly Betty?
No. Why are you getting Ugly Betty vibes?
No. So Ugly Betty is like one of my guilty pleasures. It's actually like genuine. It's
just
soap.
a pleasure.
It's a soap, but like it's so good and frankly like way ahead of its time. But in the show, her like signature, like iconic piece that she keeps throughout like her entire like transformation throughout all the seasons and everything is she has a necklace with a bee on it.
Yep.
With these, like it looks exactly like
It's probably
that.
an Anne Boleyn necklace.
Yes, it absolutely is. Now that I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I literally was like, Ugly Betty.
Ugly Betty.
America Ferrera, is that you?
A form of Ugly Betty is in the story. Don't you fret.
But no, that's her necklace. I mean, obviously,
No, Anne Boleyn's
it's her
iconic.
necklace.
Anne Boleyn is iconic, so I
That's
wouldn't be surprised if
crazy.
it was exactly that.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
No, but like some people are like, if and this was a calculated move on Anne's part to be like, oh Henry, no, I totally would have sex with you, like I totally would. Don't get me wrong, I want to, I so want to, but like, it just wouldn't be right. If only that pesky wife of yours was out of the way. And like this was just her way to become queen, and like this was her only way to go about it.
Were they like allowed to divorce during that time? No, because they're all Catholic, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that was why other people were like, no, there's no way that was true, because like how could she advocate for something that like straight up wasn't even possible for her?
Yeah.
Like how she could be like, if only you could divorce your wife. You'd be like, divorce? I don't understand. What?
Assassinate.
Yeah, that's not like a word that comes to mind. And that she was absolutely not interested in Henry at all. In fact, she ran away from court for a year because he kept sending her love letters that kept turning more and more desperate in their sympatry. And again, like you were saying, this is a Catholic nation. Like, how could she advocate for the king to do something that had never been done before?
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, what was he going to do? Divorce his wife? Henry divorced his wife.
I mean, he's the king, like, I guess.
No, this was an enormous deal. Like, this just wasn't done. Henry needed to plead his case to the Pope and get the Pope's approval for why he had to divorce, or in this case, annul.
Sorry, not the Pope being like, damn, yeah, your wife is a bitch. Go ahead.
He hired the modern equivalent of divorce lawyers to plead, like, why this annulment was the only godly decision. And this was the case he came up with on the grounds that, remember, Catherine had been his brother's wife first.
Yeah.
So he used a passage from the Old Testament, Leviticus chapter 20, verse 21.
Leviticus.
If a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an impurity. He hath uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless. I'm going to read that again. Childless? He tried to argue that Catherine was barren and his daughter was right there, just in court waving.
He's like pushing her away by the forehead.
Hiding her.
Like, no.
So, unsurprisingly, the Pope refused to annul this marriage. He's like, try again.
Wait, so he's trying to annul his marriage of like 25 years?
Yes. On the grounds that she's like barren and like cannot conceive. And so the Pope is
okay.
Yeah, the Pope is like, I don't believe you, Cap. It's not happening.
So I see your daughter. Right,
She's
like
in
waving
this
through
room.
the window.
Hot breath.
Daddy.
She's like rubbing her nose up against the glass. So like, yeah, we tried, we failed, pack it up, go home. Except no, Henry separated from Catherine anyway in 1536 without the Pope's approval. Catherine was 46, Henry was 40, and Anne Boleyn was in her 20s.
Wait, oh my God, Catherine. Catherine.
She was a little older.
Queen.
Not for long,
okay.
though.
Oh.
So Henry and Anne had a secret, unofficial wedding ceremony in January.
They got married in Vegas.
Yeah. Elvis impersonator was there.
Yes.
Because basically Anne was still like, no, we have to be married. And he's like, fine, we're married. She goes, shit. Damn it. And soon after, Anne became pregnant, which Henry took as a godly sign of approval. After firing and replacing everybody who told them this was a bad idea, in May of 1533, the marriage between Catherine and Henry was null and void. And the thing about annulment is it's not just like any other divorce where you both agree that like you guys never, like, the marriage is no longer. Annulment means that the marriage never happened in the first place. So it stripped the marriage of ever having been legitimate ever.
So now his daughter is like a bastard.
Correct.
Okay.
5 days later, the king was legally married to Anne Boleyn. And then soon after, the Pope, pissed off, launched sentences of excommunication against the king and the archbishop. And as a result of Anne's marriage to the king, the Church of England was forced to break with Rome and establish the Church of England. To recap, Henry suddenly and forcefully turned his entire country of millions of people from Roman Catholic to the Church of England, notifying no one, ignoring everyone, for the one and only purpose of marrying one woman. It is the most short-sighted, selfish, mind-bogglingly stupid decision that only a man could make. So let's unpack
Raise
this.
your standard. If a man is not willing to completely overtake the religion of the country just for your hand,
He's for the streets.
Kick him out. Kick him out.
Tell me this isn't some, like, Real Housewives drama, though. Like, the betrayal of it all. Like, not only are you replaced by, like, the younger, hotter woman, said woman was one of your personal assistants, and you, by all accounts, bend over backwards to be this very perfect wife for this very volatile man, and you were, but your only, quote-unquote, flaw was your inability to become pregnant, quote-unquote, properly.
This is literally, like, I imagine this as an SNL skit.
Like, she would love the Gone Girl monologue.
Yeah.
A newer, bouncier, cool girl. So, that was wife number 1, done and done.
Catherine 1, out.
Anne Boleyn. So, what's the deal with Anne Boleyn? It was, like, essentially because of her that England isn't Catholic anymore. And, like,
her impact.
There are 2 ways that the story goes. Either Anne Boleyn is, like, this master negotiator and girl boss who, like, slayed her way into becoming the Queen of England. Or she, like, genuinely thought that just saying, like, but your wife excuse would hold up forever, and then it suddenly didn't. And now she was just young and hot in the right place at the right time, and she accidentally became the Queen of England. Regardless, she's queen now, whether she wanted to be or not. And, like, there's definitely worse fates, especially in the 1500s. Like, how hard could being married to Henry VIII possibly be? Well, he was... he looked like that. And... he was famously difficult to get along with, and he built Anne up in his head to be on this huge pedestal. Like, her saying no to him for so long was something he was not used to, and he hyped Anne up to, like, an insane degree. Again, he wrote her so many love letters. Like, he was obsessed with her. And, like, so many men before and after him, he found that fantasy was what he was obsessed with, not necessarily the woman. Once they were wed officially, that excitement for him quickly wore off. Like, this woman who he literally broke England for was now getting kind of boring. Her pregnancy, the one that got Henry all hyped, they're like, oh my god, this is the right decision, turned out to be another daughter. Yeah. And fun fact, that daughter Elizabeth grew to be Queen Elizabeth I.
Oh my god.
Also known as the Virgin Queen. And as the story proceeds, you might understand why Anne's daughter never wanted to marry a man. Anne was smart, she was politically savvy, and she was sassy, which is perfect for a mistress, but at the time, not acceptable for a wife. It wasn't wife behavior. And, like, not only did Anne have, like, a horrific reputation, like, people blamed her for everything Henry fucked up as king. Like, if he was a tyrannical ruler, they're like, I bet that was Anne's fault. People also just, like, called her a slut, and, like, some accused her coochie of having, like, magical witchy properties. And his disappointment in her was only exaggerated when Anne also could never conceive a son after giving birth to Elizabeth. And Henry and Anne were going down the drain, and fast, but Anne had one trick on her side. If Henry wanted to annul her marriage, he would legally be married to Catherine again, which was not an option, as is previously established.
How does that...
No, that I'm not quite sure. It was basically like, if you don't have an immediate, like, replacement in mind, it's like back to the one you had before.
Interesting. Okay.
So Anne had until Catherine died to get pregnant with a son, but Catherine dying was just like a ticking clock, and the second she died, Anne would be fucked. And in the meantime, Henry was knee deep in mistresses looking to replace her. They were racing. It's like, who's first? The second Catherine dies, it was ever who get there first, Anne pregnant, or Henry found another hot piece of ass that he could replace her with. It was a very tense situation. And one of these mistresses was the Lady Jane Seymour, see pictured right there, who Henry allegedly gave a locket with his picture inside of it. It's like, as a gift, a picture of me. Wouldn't anyone want a picture of this face? Just leering at them. This is some tea. This is so dramatic. Anne was like chilling, because again, Jane was one of her ladies in waiting, and Jane was like opening and closing the locket right in front of her. She was just like, hot day outside, isn't it? And like messing with it where Anne could obviously see it. And Anne responded by ripping the locket off Jane's neck with such force that Anne's fingers bled. It's a real Housewives.
Yeah. I like how, like, I'm gonna choose. It's like a choose your own adventure. Like,
literally.
Which narrative do you think?
Because you can. That's the cool thing about English history. It's like, well, I don't know. What do you think?
I'm gonna assume that the reason why she was like, no, like, your wife, we can't be married, was because she didn't actually like him and found him disgusting. But she was also like, so that's, what's her name again? Jane. But she was still, like, fucked up over the fact that Jane had this fucking locket and was like rubbing it in her face, because our queen Anne has standards and is like, okay, I may not love him, but that is still my man.
That's fucked up.
Like, that
that's fucked up.
Okay.
And then it was announced Catherine had died. And this is the most poetic shit. Tell me this isn't ripped straight from a movie. Picture the scene, okay? The day that Catherine of Aragon was buried, Anne saw Jane Seymour sitting on Henry's lap, and she flew into such a rage that she miscarried her current pregnancy, and the fetus was a son. The timing, the symbolism. Game of Thrones wishes it could come up with something like that.
This is why, okay, throwback to our reality TV episode.
Yeah.
Where I was like, nothing is quite as entertaining as real life. Mm-hmm. Like, they're just not, the circumstances that come about in real life are just like, you can't write that shit. That's insane. Oh my God. Wow.
And like some historians, like they use the word like she had miscarried her only savior. Damn, boy. Yeah. After this, Henry declared that he had been seduced into the marriage by means of deception or spells. He agreed with the magical coochie rumor. And Jane Seymour was quickly moved into his royal quarters because men are not subtle. And it was official and was out. But here's what they did with Catherine, right? When Catherine was divorced, he just shipped her off to like a Catholic convent somewhere. Like, stripped of all of her titles. She wasn't even allowed to talk to her daughter. Like, she was just kind of like flung off into a random island, never to be seen again. And until she died, which sucks. And Anne couldn't just be done the same way. She had too much political power. Like, Anne Boleyn was now this like symbol of a Catholicless England. Mm-hmm. And she was very active in political circles, and she couldn't be made a martyr. Her reputation needed to be destroyed, and Henry needed an acceptable out that wasn't just like, I don't wanna, because that could potentially make him look as weak and wishy-washy as he fucking was in real life. So his move was potentially the most out-of-pocket thing I've ever heard. Are you ready? Are you ready for this?
Yes.
As was very common back in the day, Henry accused Anne of adultery. A handful of men Anne had come into contact with over the years were arrested on the charges, and one of these men was George Boleyn, Anne's own brother. So not only was Henry saying that Anne committed adultery against him, that she committed adultery and incest.
Also, like, Henry, that's rich coming from you.
That's the fucking crazy thing about this whole thing, is that you could not charge men with adultery. It was a one-way street. Women? Yeah.
I really shouldn't be shocked, but fuck! Fuck these guys!
Also, just like a cherry on top of the cake here, by English law, adultery on the part of the queen was also a form of treason because of the implications of the succession to the throne. So she was accused of also plotting the king's death with her quote-unquote lover so they could seize power away from him. So that's high treason, adultery, and incest. Even for the time, this was a case with little evidence, and it just was not very convincing. The biggest force behind these allegations was Thomas Cromwell, who just so happened to be one of Anne's biggest political enemies, who just really, really, really wanted her dead. And even though Anne was kind of unpopular, even critics could see that the holes are so large in this very flimsy case brought against her. And like most modern historians pretty much all agree that these charges are just completely fake. Mm-hmm. But Henry wanted her guilty, so she was found guilty, and she and all of her supposed lovers were sentenced to death in May of 1536. And this is also cool. The day that Anne was to be executed, the crown also declared that Henry and Anne's marriage was annulled, just like Henry and Catherine's. It wasn't enough that she was getting beheaded that day. Henry also wanted another takesies-backsies before her fucking head was cut off.
Literally fuck this man.
The only good part of this story is that Anne was reportedly to be like weirdly happy to die. It's just like, finally.
Sweet relief.
She was like skipping to the axe.
She's like, is it time?
She's like, right here. And then she was beheaded. That was Anne Boleyn. Thoughts?
I love her.
Everyone loves her. She's so iconic. And, like, I just find her so oddly compelling in the context of, like, the Me Too movement and, like, how the court systems of even today will use public opinion and other forms of victim blaming to bash women who they're scared of or who they find personally unlikable. Anne needed to go, and they used her reputation against her in a way that she never really did anything to deserve. Mm-hmm. And, again, that, like, evergreen idea that every man has this conniving woman who is personally twisting this narrative is just so prevalent here. Like, historians for hundreds of years regarded Anne as this, like, scheming temptress who was so power-hungry and took advantage of this weak man, and those same allegations are recycled over and over and over again to women since forever because humans are so unoriginal. And, like, regardless if she just girl bossed too close to the sun or she was just some girl stuck at the hand of some weird man's waifu phase, Anne Boleyn is iconic. Hands down, heads off.
I said what I said.
And I said what I said.
Oh, sorry. Ooh. Here's the thing, too, is that, like, things really don't change with men throughout the years.
Straight up.
Because it's like, okay, so the same fucking reasons why you were, like, so obsessed with Anne Boleyn, because she was intelligent, because she was beautiful, because she, those exact reasons are the same reasons why you were like, I fucking hate her.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's the same principle, too, as, like, all the, like, husbands of Marilyn Monroe. They're like, I just love her because she's so sexy. And then they get married. They're like, why are you sexy? And it's like,
stop it.
You kind of knew what you signed up for here, dog. Like, I don't know what to fucking tell you. Let's move on to Jane. So the day after Anne was executed, Jane married Henry. She was 28. He was 45. So who's Jane? What's the deal with Jane? Well, by all accounts, she was, and excuse the pun, a plain Jane. Anne was French, and she brought forth all these, like, liberal ideas, fashion, parties, and Jane was like, oh, I don't need all that. I'm, like, a lip gloss and mascara kind of girl, like, very not like other girls type of way.
Jane was a pick-me.
A little bit. And Jane has this reputation of being, like a pick-me, like a do-nothing, boring person, especially in comparison to Henry's earlier wives, but, like, let's just put this into perspective for a second. Imagine you're Jane. You just married Henry VIII. Condolences. With everything that I know about the type of marriage that I'm walking into, I totally understand being like a yes, dear, right away, dear, like, kind of wife.
Yeah.
Clearly, one wrong move and I'm either getting chopped in half or I'm getting thrown in Catholic jail, okay? I can't afford to have a personality, obviously. Like, Jane did one political thing once. Like, some English people held a revolt because they hated not being Catholic anymore, thanks a fucking lot, Henry. And Jane asked Henry, like, hey, I think, like, I can see where they're coming from. Like, I'm also suddenly not Catholic anymore. I think maybe you should pardon a few of them. Like, clearly, like, they're kids. Like, they don't really know what they're doing. And he looked her in the eyes and was like, I won't do that. And also, I'll remind you what happened to the last woman who meddled in my affairs. Her motto as a queen was bound to obey and serve. Bitch, I would too. God damn.
Yeah. Yeah, you're fearful.
Like, I'm sweating the whole fucking time. I'm already sweating if I'm in this time period because of the petticoats, but I'm sweating harder.
It's like Stockholm syndrome.
Jane was sweet, though. Like, remember Mary, Catherine's only daughter? Like, that bastard label. And Mary was going through that emo phase of, like, no one likes me, everyone wants me to die. And it's funny because, like, everyone did want her to die. And essentially Jane was like, I'm not the stepmom, I'm the mom who stepped up. Her and Mary got pretty close, which was nice. And Jane got pregnant successfully and gave birth, and the child was a boy.
Okay.
We go. I know you were smiling. I know you were waiting for the daughter, but she got a son. Jane's 3 wives in. We're a son. Hallelujah. Praise God. She did it. That son of a bitch did it. She gave birth to Henry's only son, Edward, a year or so after being married. In a better world, this would be the end of it. But no, this is womanhood, and life sucks, so this is not the end of it. The birth was a difficult one, and Jane died due to complications from childbirth just 12 days after her son was born. And there are some historians that think that Henry loved her the most out of all of his wives. When Henry eventually did die, he chose to be buried next to Jane out of all of them.
Because she was the most pliable.
Correct. This could also just be a political signal to reinforce the legitimacy of Edward as his heir. Like, literally, who's to say, I don't care about what this man thinks. And that was
Choose
Jane.
your own adventure.
That was Jane. Like, short-lived, sweet, made to be exactly what the patriarchy wants from women. To be flirty and sexy when you're dating them, and then once they're married, turn to these quiet, obedient baby machines at great personal cost and dangers. Jane Seymour is a conservative's wet dream. And that's 3 for 3. 3 tragic tales about the patriarchy. And we've still got 3 wives left, but we're about halfway through. So take a breather. Thoughts so far about these 3? These are the most, like, damning ones. The most tea happens with these 3 wives.
Oh, okay. I mean, I just feel bad for all of them, to be frank.
Yeah, you kind of feel bad for all of them, especially, we're getting into wife that I feel the most bad for. But there's a reprieve. So let's pick things up with Anna of Cleves. Favorite wife. Favorite wife alert. This is my favorite wife out of all of them. This is her.
Okay.
So her story is just so relatable and timeless that I cannot believe it takes place in the 1500s. I cannot believe it. So 2 years pass since Jane is dead. Henry has that son he wanted, but you never want to put all your eggs in one basket. You need backup boys. And you need to complete your royal set. Like, you can't just be the one king, because then people are like, are you impotent? Are you... Are you... limp wrist? Yeah, you just need to get married, but there's less pressure, you know? And this marriage would be strategic. And because of that, Henry could only stick it out for 6 months, because he has no foresight and he is dumb. So he wanted to make more European alliances, since right now England looked like a messy clusterfuck, and he gave up trying to play nice with France. Like, Anne was really close with France, fucked that up. He's given up with France, and England and France never really get along anyway. And there were 2 German sisters put up for eligibility, Anna and Amelia of Cleves. And Henry sent a famed portrait painter to go down and paint the 2 sisters and bring those portraits back to him just to see what he was getting himself into, right? Henry was like, I've been around the block a few times. I'm no fool. Okay, I'm going to be cautious. I'm going to be weary. I'm going to think this through. That's her portrait? I pick that one. That one. I'm going to marry that one. I don't care about anything else about her. She's hot and we'll be married immediately.
I just imagine him, like, laying on the floor with the portrait with, like, his legs kicking in the air, like, drawing little hearts around.
Based off of her portrait, and her portrait alone, Anna of Cleves was engaged and fetched from Germany to be the new Queen of England. And I feel like this is a given at this point, but yes, Anna was also half of Henry's age. Bonus points for not knowing a single word in English.
I literally was about to ask, does she even know English?
No, she super doesn't. He literally was like swiping, because he ordered he ordered portraits for all of his betrothed, like, candidates, and he was I'm not making this up, he was swiping through, looking at all of the portraits in the hall, and he matched with one. So here we go. They meet for the first time. Everything's all excited. She takes off her veil, and essentially Henry was catfished. You know how, like, you have your angles that you take all your selfies with? Like, for me, I have such a round face that all my selfies have to be that 3/4 angle. Well, Anna's portrait was painted exclusively at her good angle. So this was, like, all the other portraits, you know, are from the side, right? Hers is the only one facing head on, apparently because her nose was very large. So a portrait from head on can hide that.
Oh, it was, like, long. Okay. Relatable.
Yeah. And also, like, she apparently had, like, smallpox scars and, like, pimples, and, like, she had terrible skin, but you can't tell that because the painter literally uses, like, filters, and I'm like, what is this? Like, what? This cannot be a 1500s problem. This happened yesterday.
He was face tuning her
like,
pic.
Literally Photoshop in the 15th century. Henry was pissed. He was like, okay, throw her back. This one's no good. His advisors were like, sir? If you send her back now, you'll be making an enemy of Germany. And we, like, can't afford to have Germany also. Like, that's the thing about wanting alliances, is that you have to secure the alliance, and you kind of can't go back on the alliance, because then you just made an enemy by choice.
Yeah. Wow. Imagine a war starting, because he's like, damn, you're ugly. Like, take her back.
Oh, this one sucks.
Ew.
No. And also, Henry, look at yourself.
Stamping his little foot. No.
It just sucks because it's like, I'm sure she also thought the same fucking thing. Yeah. She was like, damn it. Dossie's bad. Dossie's fucked. Reluctantly, Anna and Henry were wed. This is fun. Henry refused to consummate the marriage. Not on their wedding night. Not for weeks, not for months, never. This man, who was so desperate for more children to continue his precious bloodline, never touched Anna more than a kiss occasionally, after which he probably fucking gagged and was like, ugh, and like wiped his mouth and like ran away.
Was she that hideous?
A lot of people don't even think so. It's just that he was a fucking stubborn jackass who hated when he didn't even get his way.
Oh my
like, a lot of other court people were like, sir.
He's literally like, I'd rather be celibate. Like,
like, because other people at court were like, then asked, because she kind of, like, she's infamous for being, like, quote unquote, the ugly wife, but other people at court were like, she's fine.
Yeah, I'm like, she, like, I don't know. Honestly, out of all these photos, like, she looks like the prettiest one to me.
Maybe she was just ahead of her time.
Yeah. Also, wait, how old was she?
I think she was in her mid-20s.
Okay.
And he was like 45 or so.
So she has some adult acne. Like,
yeah.
That's fine.
Some of us.
Yes. Who among us?
He, like, completely blamed Anna. He's like, no, it's not my fault. I can't get it up. Sorry. Lack of arousal. Can't do it. It's all her fault. Historians actually believe that Henry was most likely old and couldn't get it up reliably, even if he wanted to. And he was probably just too fucking stubborn to actually want to give her, like, a fucking chance.
Yeah.
So it was probably not even her fault. Like, it was just this old bitch. It was like,
do we know if she ever learned English or if he ever learned German?
Neither. She spoke no English. She learned a little bit towards the end because she stayed in England after this whole ordeal. So I'm sure she learned eventually.
So, like, did they even speak?
No. I think they must have had, like, an interpreter or something.
Oh, my God.
At one point, like, he kissed her goodnight, and then she, like, went to her, like, German, like, handmaiden and was like, I think I'm pregnant. He kissed me. Like, no one told her how, yeah, and someone had to be like, girl.
This is why sex ed is important, guys.
Everyone, sex ed, please, Christ. She was kind enough. Like, she liked to do needlework. We don't know much about her because, again, the two of them were only married for, like, 6 months before he was like, I can't. I can't. I need an annulment now. And his grounds for an annulment was that she was previously engaged and thus was probably not a virgin. And, like, most women in general, but especially of this time period, would take this as, like, a horrible offense to their character. But Anna, in, like, a surprising move, went, I super don't care. I don't want to be married to you anymore either. I am not going to fight you on this. Yep, correct. Take the annulment. I agree.
So every time I don't know if you know this, but every time he wants to annul his marriage, does he have to go to the Pope?
Not anymore.
Because they're not Catholic anymore.
Yeah.
Never mind.
But he still had to make an excuse to court. Because it couldn't, and it couldn't just be like, I don't want to. Because then it's like, oh, our king doesn't know what he wants. It always had to be her fault of some kind. And it was just the easiest way to explain why they're getting annulled. As like, oh, it's because she's a whore.
I just imagine every time he, like, comes into the courtroom, he's just like,
guys.
Hi.
It's like the Bi Sisters.
You're never gonna guess.
It's like an influencer apology video every time. He's like, court's gathered, and he goes, and everyone goes, oh, for the love of God, not again. Henry, God, please, this is wife number 4.
Doing this.
I can't keep track. And Anna is the only wife of Henry VIII that left willingly. So she was given, like, a stupidly large settlement. Girl was rolling in it for the rest of her life, getting all the benefits of being a queen without actually having to do the hard part of being married to Henry.
Honestly, sounds like a pretty sweet deal.
Like, she wasn't invited to court anymore, but so she made her own court in her newly gifted Herver Castle. She networked, she had connections, and she outlived Henry, Henry's heir, and all of the other wives. A girl boss to the very end. I love her. She's my favorite because I'm always like, damn, been there.
What?
Anyone ever look at you and go, God? No. But like that is such like a now 21st century problem of like getting catfished and being like, you don't look anything like your profile picture. But the fact that she was just like,
funny.
I want out. I want out. The suck. I want to leave. Okay, this is where it gets sad. Sorry, everyone. We're going to talk about Catherine Howard, so trigger warning for sexual assault, sexual abuse, and suicide.
Holy shit.
There she is.
Okay.
Yeah, so buckle up. Hope we get all our laughs out, because this is actually, like, the saddest story of all of his wives, and I'm including Anne Boleyn in that. Married just 19 days after Henry and Anna split, Henry was 49, and Catherine Howard was between 15 and 18. People don't actually know the exact, but she was between 15 and 18 years old. Even at the time, they were like, hey, Henry, that's weird.
Yeah.
So you like, guys can't even be like, well, it was a different time. It super wasn't. Not that weird. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, it was long ago, but enough that the standards of English court were still like, this is a child.
Well, I feel like during that time, it was more, like, it wasn't like 50-year-old kings marrying 15-year-olds. It was more like, oh, this 15-year-old and this 18-year-old, like, peasants are going to wed. You know,
like this 18-year-old and this 18-year-old, or this 15-year-old and this 15-year-old, not this 50-year-old and this 15-year-old. Henry is told to have liked her because she was so innocent compared to his other wives. She was vivacious. She was giggly. She displayed great interest in her dance lessons, but she would be distracted and make jokes during them. Maybe because she was a teenager, you freak. It's giving Lolita. It's giving like, oh my gosh, it's like she's just so innocent and like she'll just, I'm like, actively throw up. It gets sadder. Raised in a poorly supervised boarding school of sorts, Catherine was surrounded by young girls who were routinely preyed upon by passing soldiers, staff, and other older gentlemen. When she was around 12 or 14, her older music teacher, Henry Maddox, sexually groomed and abused her. She eventually ran away and severed all contact with him, but was then pursued by another older man, secretary of the Dowager Duchess, who Catherine claimed later in life to have raped her, and then abandoned her for his wife. Her uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, found her a place in Henry's court as on his lady-in-waiting to give her something to do. It is widely speculated that the Howard family put Catherine in Henry's court on purpose, knowing that Henry was desperate for a new wife, and that Catherine was young, hot, and exactly the type of girl that Henry had a past of courting. She was used as a pawn in her family's game for fame, and Henry being a predictable idiot, it worked very, very well. He claimed he had never known, quote, the like to any woman. He literally said that she wasn't like other girls. Yeah, everyone just like, ugh. Within months of her arrival at court, Henry bestowed gifts of land and expensive cloth upon Catherine. Henry called her his very jewel of womanhood, his rose without a thorn. If you're picking up his obsession with Anne Boleyn vibes, you should, because you'd be right. So, voila! Now Henry's married to a teenager. Everyone was like, oh, she's so carefree and naive. What a refreshing change of pace. Possibly because she's 15. All of you, jail. Go to jail. All of you, jail. Unfortunately, there's more unfortunate to the story. This part of the story, there's no happy. Henry was dealing with a shit ton of health problems that kept getting worse, leading to his temper being even more aggressive and his brain becoming leaked with paranoia. Ugh. So Catherine made a friend with another older man in court, Thomas Culpeper, Henry's favorite male courtier. At first, Thomas and the other male members of court would catch Catherine up on court affairs, since she was too young to participate in court. Someone had to every day be like, this is what happened in court today because you were too young to be in there. But she was the Queen of England at the same time. Some historians stand firm in their claim that this wasn't a sexual relationship, at least at first. Thomas's diary has him develop a sudden and overwhelming crush who he called his sweet little fool.
No.
Most likely this was a friendship that turned sexual once an older man in Catherine's life wanted to have sex with her, and this wasn't exactly Catherine's first rodeo when it came to that type of relationship. People who claim to have witnessed her earlier sexual behavior when she was 13, when she was a child, reportedly contacted her for favors in return for their silence about it, and some of these blackmailers were appointed to her royal household to keep them silent. But eventually, the cracks started to show. Henry was made aware of Catherine's sexual history, and he had her promptly arrested.
Yeah, I love how they're like, oh, yeah, so remember when I raped you? You have to keep me silent.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your reputation's gonna be terribly tarnished.
Correct.
Yeah, that's fucked. That's fucked up.
Yeah, even the staunch leader against, who brought forth the allegation in the first place, the current archbishop, found the teenaged Catherine's frantic, incoherent state pitiable, saying, quote, I found her in such lamentation and heaviness as I never saw no creature, so that it would have pitied any man's heart to have looked upon her. He ordered the guards to remove any objects she might use to commit suicide, and locked her in a cell somewhere, awaiting trial. So, the trial itself was a little bit of a farce. We all kind of knew where this was going, but there was a couple legal technicalities that could have saved her from death, just exiled, banished, penniless, but she still would be alive. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, all of Catherine's family, who weren't arrested for treason charges, put all the blame on Catherine, calling her the usual, a slut, an idiot, etc. This isn't my fault. The family that put her in Henry's court in the first place fled. And then later made statements being like, look, she wanted it. This was all out of my doing. She was such a wild card. We didn't know what else to do with her. We hoped that being with Henry would set her straight, but I guess not. We had no idea. Who, little old us? Little old us?
It's giving parents of child stars.
Ooh! Yes. And this sucks. In January 1542, Parliament passed the Royal Assent by Commission Act 1541, which made it treason and punishable by death for a queen consort to fail to disclose her sexual history to the king within 20 days of their marriage, or to incite someone to commit adultery with her. So already it was treason to commit adultery, but then they added a little clause that if you didn't tell the king if you had sex beforehand, or your entire sexual history beforehand within 20 days of marriage, before or after, that was also considered treason. I wonder who put that there. Who put that there? It could have been anyone. Look, we're all trying to figure out who did this. Yeah, if Catherine had a shred of hope of survival, that ship had officially sailed. And when the Lord of Councils came for her, because remember how Anne Boleyn was, like, gleeful? Went to her death with a smile on her face. She literally was kicking and screaming as they dragged her to the barge that would escort her to the Tower on Friday, February 1542, and she passed the heads of Culpeper and Dereham. So they had already found the two men that had messed around with her and put their heads on the pike in front of where she was going to be. So already, a lot of conflicting feelings, I'm sure, about what was going through her head at this time. And their heads remained there for like 3 years. And then, yeah, she was then beheaded and thrown into an unmarked grave. And to this day, we don't know where she is. There's no marker that says where her skeleton is. We kind of have no clue where she went. So kind of a downer. Thoughts? That was Catherine Howard. I feel like, unfortunately, everyone kind of has, like, a Catherine Howard story. If not them, then someone they know. It's just, like, yeah, someone from a young age being taught that, like, sex was love and not really knowing anything about consent, about boundaries, just kind of being used and thinking that you might have found solace in different areas, but then they're like, oh, maybe this time it'll be different. And then no time is ever different because men just found you so hot that, like, what were they supposed to do? The only solace I can possibly think in this story is that every man who potentially did her wrong sexually also died. So, small peanuts. And again, they want her exactly how she is until she continues to act the same after marriage. Same thing with Marilyn earlier, with Anne Boleyn, where it's like, I just love her because she's so carefree and she's so, like, sexually liberated and she's just so fun. I'm like, well, first of all, it's because she's like a little girl. Me when I get you. She's the Lolita wife. Yeah. If you're gonna, like, give all of them the nickname, like the ugly wife, the one that was divorced, beheaded, she's the Lolita. Where it's like, I love her because she's, like, different. Not that different! And maybe Henry would have been more lenient to her, but again, he was, like, dealing with, like, 18,000 health issues at this point, and his brain was turning to goop before people's very eyes, so. All right, move on. Last wife, Catherine Parr. Third wife named Catherine. Yeah, I'm going to keep it a buck. This is where a lot of the interesting stuff ends. Like, don't get me wrong, Catherine still did an impressive amount of stuff. Like, she was also on her fourth husband, which is cool. Usually Henry was such a stickler for, like, I wanted to be as virginous as possible. Henry was on his sixth wife now, and even the dumb, stupid, aging, sickly, dumb idiot Henry knew this was kind of a lot. And that, he's like, oh, this is going to be what I'm remembered for, isn't it?
He's like, I got to pick my battles.
Literally. So his next and final wife needed to be stable, at the very least. So Henry married his sixth wife, Catherine Parr, in July of 1543. She was a widow, she was spirited, she was educated, but she was kind of showing an interest in Protestantism. So Henry had her arrested. He's doing a really good job of maintaining his temper. Very cool, Henry. But she managed to avoid the fate of her predecessors, essentially being like, Henry, you cannot afford to marry a seventh time. Holy shit. Either free me or look like an idiot. So he freed her.
Okay.
At this point, he was just like...
A win is a win.
He was just like a fucking lump on a bed at this point. Like, he was like labored breathing. He had, like, gout everywhere. He had, like, his feet were, like, swollen. Like, he was dying. He was on his way out. And she's just like, who else are you gonna get? Look me in the eyes. Henry, who else do you have in your corner? She was a writer. She actually published 3 books, one under her own name, the first woman in England to do so.
Oh my god.
Someone actually had to rule England, and bedridden shucklefuck Henry wasn't doing anything useful, so she actually took it upon herself to rule for him. Surprisingly, when you put a woman in charge, wouldn't you know it, she brought stability and peace to the court, while serving as a kind and caring stepmother to 3 of Henry's children. I'm not the stepmom, I'm the mom who stepped up. Out of all of Henry's wives, historians say that Catherine Parr had the most influence on the widest variety of areas, including court culture, religion, the role of women, and in the education of Henry's children. She also persuaded Henry to restore his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, to the order of succession. Before, they were just bastards. She convinced him, like, hey, even though they're just your daughters, if something happens to Edward, your only son, don't you want to have any backup plans? Because I'm not giving you any more fucking kids. And he did. She was successful in that. And without her, we wouldn't have had, well, Bloody Mary or the Virgin Queen, Queen Elizabeth I. So that was her. Thanks, Queen.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Katie B. And she acted as regent when Henry went to war with France eventually, because they're always going to war with France. So she, like, took over for him for a while.
Slay.
And then Henry VIII died.
Yay!
Everyone rejoice. This is queen behavior. Catherine had been seeing someone, and then Henry came calling, being like, hey, by the way, you're engaged to me now. And she was like, all right. And she had to break it off. Thomas Seymour. The second Henry died, Catherine and Thomas married. So fast that it caused quite a stir in court. Because you're supposed to mourn for at least a little bit. She didn't. Like, Henry was like warm in the ground, and then she was already married to the guy that she was seeing beforehand. It's a taste of his own medicine, is what I'm hearing. Karma's karma.
It was literally like, a party's a party. Like, let's just do a dual funeral wedding and save some money.
Like half black dress, half white dress.
She like rips off the black gown. There's a wedding dress underneath.
Grandmama, it's me.
They stand on top of his grave.
Start dancing on it. Yeah, the most successful girl boss of them all. And those were the wives. See what I mean now? Where I'm like, it's like a speed run of every possible way that, like, men have abused women in the past. You see it in all of these. And on top of, like, just the funness of the fact that he had 6 wives. Like, that doesn't happen. At most, you tap at 4. But, yeah, these are the wives. Please pick your favorite. Pick your favorite. Pick your girl boss that you connect with. You can,
I think,
you know,
boss,
let's do 2.
2?
Because there's, you know, there's a lot of them.
Okay. Anne Boleyn, number 1, she's my queen, my ugly Betty.
She's my ugly Betty.
Oh, that's what you
Anna of Cleves is my ugly Betty.
And then I feel bad for Catherine number 2. I feel much sympathy.
Catherine Howard.
Yeah, and so in that way, I'm just like, you were just a girl.
She was just a kid. Like, she didn't know anything.
Yeah.
She barely knew how to read and write.
Yeah. So I'm like, but
there's no non-sympathetic wife in here. Even Jane.
Yeah.
I'm like, I get it, girl. Like,
yeah. But I think, yeah, top 2, Anne Boleyn, and then I'm just gonna call her Catherine the Third.
As you should.
Yeah, the third one.
Yeah, as far as, like, the happy endings go, there isn't a ton. But I like the Anna of Cleves and Catherine Parr had the closest thing to a happy ending, as they're just like, fuck it, we ball. They came out the most unscathed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does kind of suck that the only reason that these women are brought up at all is in relation to Henry VIII. I wish that weren't the case. Yeah. And the strange thing about Anne Boleyn is that she's so infamous. She's so famous, but we know frustratingly little about her just because, like, so much of, well, her memoirs were lost. We know exactly how Henry feels about her. We have all of the letters that he kept sending her, even after she ran away from him because he was being a creep. We know exactly how he felt about her. But the way that she felt, well, because clearly she wasn't a very popular figure as by design when she died. Like, who wants to stand up and vouch for, like, the incestuous whore that, like, fucked her own brother? No one does. And so, like, even though she's one of the most studied figures in all of English history, we know frustratingly little about her, which is why it's like, come one, all headcanons. What do you think?
Yeah.
Isn't there a little Anne Boleyn in all of us? I want that bee necklace, though. Moral of the story, if you find yourself relating at all to Henry VIII, die. Post haste. And that's tea. Yeah, in general, I know a lot of my Skylar-centric episodes of this podcast tend to be a lot of Skylar teaches you something you didn't learn before. But I think one of the things that I personally find history so fascinating is it's just like, we tend to consider historical figures to be unrelatable, untouchable, history itself to be just an inevitability. Like, we never see historical choices being made as they could have been made any other way. Like, of course this is going to happen. Of course, you know, like, we're going to revolt against England, and of course it's a Revolutionary War, and of course then we wrote the Constitution. Like, it all just seems so set in stone. And what I think, when I realized that history was just a bunch of random choices, not always brought together, but this, like, historical wisdom but also by, like, knee-jerk reactions, emotional reactions, not thinking things through, by being cowardly and callous and just being stupid. So much of history is people being stupid, and I find that so relatable. And, like, yeah, the same way I find, like, cave drawings also emotional to me. It's just like, damn, like, that was us, and it's gonna be us. Like, ancient Greek graffiti, it was just like, so and so was here, and I'm like, we're just the same. We've always been the same. She's just like me, for real. I am Anne Boleyn. It's me. It's me, Anne Boleyn.
I'm back.
I'm back and better than ever. All right, that's it for me, love. We just talking in English accents for the rest of this.
Oh, right. We should have done.
Why shouldn't we do that earlier? I just did this. I just talked the whole time in a fucking awful Cockneyed accent and get demonetized because the whole of England is like, that's the most offensive use of.
That's horrible.
Horrible.
Well, thank you all so much for listening. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you want to listen to more of our content, that's where you can go. We now have like almost 30 episodes, which
that's
look at us being consistent. Crazy.
It's not a phase, Mom.
No.
I love talking to the void. It's my favorite.
Describing your podcast is not a phase.
It's not a phase. It's not a phase, Mum.
Okay. Bye. Bye.